Overnight, you mentioned Natanz getting bombed. That's one of the three nuclear enrichment sites that was hit during Operation Midnight Hammer. It's located 150 miles south of Tehran, as you mentioned.
The United States dropped 14-ton bombs on Iran's most heavily protected nuclear facility twice in 3 weeks. And this time, it didn't just target the entrances, it went deeper. On the morning of March 21, 2026, the Natanz nuclear enrichment facility was shaken once again. Tunnel entrances collapsed, ventilation shafts were sealed, and access ramps were destroyed. At a depth of 50 meters, behind 2.5 meters of concrete, hundreds of kilograms of enriched uranium and possibly trapped personnel remain in the dark, an underground labyrinth with decreasing oxygen, rising temperatures, and cut-off communications. The platform used for the operation was the B-2 Spirit stealth bomber, the only radar-invisible aircraft, which took off from Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri and flew for 18 hours to reach Iran. The Israeli news agency Kan confirmed that the strike was carried out using bunker-busting bombs, and that Israel had also struck its part of Natanz. In the first week of Operation Epic Fury, the Israeli Air Force attacked 3 of Natanz's underground enrichment halls with its own penetrating munitions, likely GBU-72 or GBU-28 bombs. The United States, on the other hand, dropped 2 GBU-57 bombs on the main hall housing the centrifuges. Weighing 14 tons, measuring 6.2 meters in length, and capable of penetrating up to 60 meters underground, this bomb is the largest of its kind in the conventional category. In other words, Natanz was effectively hit from 2 fronts. Israel weakened the structure, and the United States delivered the heaviest blow. On March 3, 2026, the IAEA confirmed that the entry buildings at Natanz had suffered significant damage and that access to the underground facilities had effectively been cut off. The main facility remained intact but became inaccessible. The March 21st strike used the same weapon system, but this time targeted a different, deeper objective beyond the entrances. This marks the 5th major offensive against Natanz. The main enrichment plant is located 40 to 50 meters underground and is surrounded by thick concrete shielding. Inside are halls capable of housing up to 50,000 centrifuges. Surface facilities include 2 massive halls covering 2,500 square meters and administrative buildings with capacity for 1,000 personnel. However, the real mystery lies in the facilities within the Pickaxe Mountain, about a mile to the south. This new complex, carved into the heart of the Zagros Mountains, extends to depths of up to 100 meters. According to some intelligence reports, Iran has moved its most sensitive operations to depths of up to 800 meters, deeper than the NORAD headquarters inside Cheyenne Mountain. So did the 14-ton bombs reach that depth? No, but they didn't need to. The objective was to destroy access ramps and ventilation systems, rendering the nuclear and military structures inside completely inoperable. At this point, a critical question emerges. When the entrances collapsed, who or what was left inside? The underground chambers at Natanz are not self-sustaining living spaces. Centrifuge operations require continuous electricity, cooling water, ventilation, and a steady supply of UF6 gas. These machines generate significant heat while spinning at extremely high speeds. And if that heat is not dissipated, the rotors begin to deform. If ventilation shafts were damaged when the entrances were destroyed, and if the United States specifically targeted ventilation shafts during the Fordow strike in June 2025, temperature control may have been lost. There is an even more concerning possibility. Given the facility's capacity of 1,000 personnel, it is likely that service crews were present during the attack. These individuals could now be trapped in a maze of sealed exits, potentially exposed to toxic gases or UF6. UF6, when it comes into contact with moisture, forms hydrofluoric acid and can become deadly in a confined space within hours. Without electricity, ventilation systems, lighting, and communication systems will not function. At depths of 40 to 50 meters, there is no natural air circulation. Establishing communication with the outside world is nearly impossible due to bombed entrances and damaged cables. Under wartime conditions, organizing an external rescue operation to clear collapsed entrances is extremely difficult, especially with the risk of renewed strikes. Iran claims there is no radiation leak, and the IAEA confirms this. However, the IAEA currently has no physical access to the facility. The entrances are collapsed. Verification is based on remote measurements, not on data from inside the site. One of the most sensitive but least discussed aspects of this conflict involves Russian personnel. The situation at the Bushehr nuclear plant is clear. Rosatom stated that as of November 2025, the plant was operated by 3,000 specialists, including 700 Russian citizens, many of them highly skilled personnel. The reactor was shut down as a precaution on March 3rd. Around 150 Russians were evacuated, but 639 remain at the facility. So, are there Russian personnel at Natanz? There is no concrete data, and that silence speaks volumes. Iran's nuclear program has received technical support from Russian and Chinese experts since the 1990s. Russian companies provided expertise and equipment, while centrifuge designs were transferred through Pakistan's AQ Khan network. Russia built Bushehr, and in 2025, a $25 billion contract was signed with Rosatom for a new facility in Hormozgan. Assuming this network of cooperation has completely ended at Natanz would be naive, but proving it is equally difficult. Russia's response to the Natanz strike is notable. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova called it a clear violation of international law. Vladimir Putin, in his Nowruz message, emphasized that Moscow remains a loyal friend and reliable partner to Iran. Strong words, but no concrete action. No air defense systems have been offered, and no military support has been provided. There may be an explanation for this contradiction. Russia opposes the bombing of Iran, but it also opposes a nuclear-armed Iran, which would threaten its own regional interests. Moscow's combination of strong rhetoric and limited action stems from this tension. Satellite imagery and analysis published by CNN reveal the scale of the situation. Iran has built 27 underground bases embedded deep within mountainous terrain across the country, with a total of 107 tunnel entrances identified. The United States and Israel have targeted at least 77% of these bases. Access points were destroyed, leaving munitions trapped underground. However, Iran's response has been striking. According to CNN, Iran often restores access by excavating new tunnel entrances within 48 hours of an attack. This demonstrates both the depth of Iran's underground engineering capabilities and the Sisyphus effect facing the United States. Destroy one entrance, and another appears nearby within 2 days. The U.S. strikes, Iran digs. This cycle represents one of the most costly and inefficient aspects of the conflict. However, Israel appears to be attempting a different approach to break this pattern. Israeli technology seems to have made significant advances in detecting underground shelters. The precision of Israeli strikes on Iran's underground missile launch sites suggests that modern surveillance systems can detect heat, vibrations, and other signals, even from deep below the surface. This means the strategy of hiding inside mountains is no longer as reliable as it once was. Seeing a bunker is not the same as destroying it, but targeting what you can detect is far easier. Public concern in the United States is also growing. Reports about access to Iran's underground missile cities have raised serious security questions. Discussions in Washington are focusing on how such access was achieved and under what conditions. The structure of Iran's underground architecture remains uncertain. It is unclear whether this visibility reflects an intelligence breakthrough or a deliberate transparency move by Iran. The scale of these tunnel networks is critically important. The Kazma mountain facility south of Natanz has two pairs of tunnel entrances, one set to the east and another to the west. According to the Institute for Science and International Security, these entrances were reinforced with concrete slabs, and additional structural features were added after the June 2025 conflict to increase resilience. Satellite images show a truck leaving the tunnel facility immediately after the June 18, 2025 strike. This suggests that Iran may have moved critical materials, likely enriched uranium stockpiles, to deeper facilities prior to the attack. Natanz is not a nuclear reactor. It is an enrichment facility. This distinction is crucial because it fundamentally changes the risk profile. A meltdown scenario like Chernobyl or Fukushima does not apply here. There is no reactor core capable of initiating a nuclear chain reaction. However, that does not mean the risk is zero. The first danger is a UF6 gas leak. Uranium hexafluoride is processed in centrifuges under high pressure and is extremely toxic. When exposed to moisture, it forms hydrofluoric acid, causing both chemical burns and radiation exposure. In the event of damaged centrifuges or pipelines, lethal concentrations could quickly build up in enclosed underground spaces. The second risk is low-level radioactive contamination. Dust or residues of enriched uranium could be dispersed from damaged equipment. However, this would have a far more limited and localized impact compared to reactor accidents. The third, and perhaps most insidious, risk is long-term environmental contamination. If hundreds of kilograms of enriched uranium are left uncontrolled in a damaged underground facility, there is a risk that over time they could seep into groundwater. Natanz is located near fertile plains between Isfahan and Kashan, close to a key agricultural basin. Uranium contamination reaching underground aquifers could trigger an environmental disaster lasting generations. This would not be a sudden explosion, but a slow, silent poisoning scenario. In terms of regional impact, Natanz is not and will not become a Chernobyl. However, Gulf states and Iraq are concerned. The loss of control over Iran's nuclear facilities has triggered alerts in regional radiation monitoring systems. IAEA Director General Rafael Grossi's warning to avoid military actions that could risk a nuclear accident reflects these concerns. So far, the IAEA states that no radiological consequences are expected. However, the agency's access has been restricted for 8 months. It cannot verify inventories of low and high enriched uranium. In other words, right now, no one knows for certain how much material exists or where it is located. Analyst Andrea Stricker outlines a possible scenario. Iran had stored part of its enriched uranium in easily transportable containers within the Isfahan tunnel complex and was constructing a new enrichment plant there. The United States destroyed the tunnel entrances in June 2025 using Tomahawk missiles, but the fate of the material inside remains unknown. A similar situation may apply to Natanz. The entrances were destroyed, but hundreds of kilograms of uranium enriched to 60% remain inside. For decades, Iran's nuclear strategy has relied on deterrence, the implicit threat of developing a nuclear weapon if pushed too far. Now, the physical infrastructure supporting that strategy is being systematically dismantled. As a result, much of Natanz's physical infrastructure has been destroyed or rendered inaccessible. Centrifuges have been damaged, entrances collapsed, and ventilation systems sealed. No one knows for certain what lies deep beneath the mountain, but the nuclear program itself is not a building, not a centrifuge, and not a facility buried under layers of concrete and earth. It is the scientific knowledge governing uranium isotope separation. It is the metallurgical expertise required to produce maraging steel rotors. It is the engineering process that connects thousands of machines into a functioning enrichment system. That knowledge exists in human minds, and no bomb can turn it into a crater. As long as Iran's nuclear scientists remain alive, and as long as this knowledge is preserved across universities and research centers, the program can be rebuilt. Replacing centrifuges takes months. Destroying knowledge is impossible. Right now, behind collapsed entrances at depths of 40 to 50 meters, in unventilated chambers with inoperable cooling systems, hundreds of kilograms of enriched uranium remain. It is unknown whether personnel are still inside. It cannot be confirmed whether Russian technical advisors were present. However, given the presence of 700 Russian experts at Bushehr, it is difficult to assume there were none at Natanz. In the past 24 hours, the United States has reportedly struck Natanz again, possibly for the 6th or even 7th time. Each strike further damages the physical infrastructure. These developments show that this war is no longer just about missile bases or oil tankers in the Strait of Hormuz. It now directly targets Iran's nuclear and energy backbone. According to Reuters, Iranian media reported that the Shahid Ahmadi Roshan enrichment complex in Natanz was struck again. In the same report, technical teams stated there was no radiological leak. This is significant, as it suggests the objective is not to create a Chernobyl-like disaster, but to disrupt access, functionality, and continuity. The goal is not to disperse nuclear material into the air, but to make the facility inoperable, inaccessible, and irreparable. Even if an underground nuclear facility is not completely destroyed, it can be strategically neutralized if entrances, ramps, ventilation, and internal logistics collapse. Earlier assessments reported by Reuters citing the IAEA support this logic. Access structures were targeted, but no significant radiological impact was detected in the main halls. In other words, while the knowledge behind the nuclear program remains intact, the physical system that turns it into production is being systematically dismantled. And this is where the new phase of the conflict is taking shape. However, the most significant development in the past 24 hours goes beyond Natanz. Reuters reports that Donald Trump issued a strict 48-hour ultimatum to Iran, stating that if the Strait of Hormuz is not fully reopened, Iran's energy and electrical infrastructure could be targeted. Iran responded immediately. The Revolutionary Guards warn that if Iran's energy facilities are attacked, they will retaliate by targeting infrastructure supplying energy, water, and electricity to U.S. bases in the Gulf. This fundamentally changes the logic of the conflict. The sides are no longer just targeting military forces. They are now signaling willingness to strike critical infrastructure that keeps entire states functioning. Facilities like Natanz are not just part of a nuclear program. They are central to Iran's strategic identity. If power plants, transmission networks, and export corridors become open targets, then the challenge for Iran is no longer just protecting its nuclear program, but maintaining the basic functioning of the country itself.